Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me today is none other than Professor Jim Madden, who, if you're a fan of Pat Flynn's show, no doubt you have heard this guy many times, or at least heard of him, because he is a frequent guest on the Pat Flynn show, which is how he and I got connected. And we're going to be talking about a kind of his origin story, as well as how he stays strong and fit, despite having a very physically active life. He does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then he also, on the other hand, has a very sedentary life in that he's a professor at a college, and that doesn't require anything much more athletic than shuffling papers. So learning how he manages to deal with both of those extremes and still come out on top is going to be the number one focus of the podcast, as well as his results from a strength training program that I wrote for him. He had a pretty good outcome. So I wanted to dive into that and particularly talk about some of the things that he did and that he found were most helpful. And if this is the first time you're tuning in, I just want to remind you that you should definitely grab a copy of my 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. It is designed around the gait pattern and particularly movements that will strengthen your gait pattern so that you can get stronger. All your favorite kettlebell and bodyweight movements, or even your least favorite kettlebell and bodyweight movements. And best of all, it can be done in conjunction with what you're currently doing. So it is designed to complement your training and not complicate your training. So go to 9minutechallenge.com. It's the number 9minutechallenge.com. You can get your own free copy. It's digital download so that you can get started ASAP or almost as soon as possible, because I want you to finish listening to this episode first. But after that, go to 9minutechallenge.com. So without further ado, Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Alec. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
I appreciate this programming like odyssey that we've been on for. It's been like 20 weeks, right? Yeah,
it's been a long time. I forgot when we began, but it's definitely been several months by this point.
Yeah, it was before Christmas. Yeah.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you've got a good memory, because I obviously I do a lot of programming for a lot of different people, and so sometimes like the exact dates and stuff like that, like just like fly by me. So I don't remember.
I remember sitting on the tree all excited when you sent me the first part of the program opening. I love programs, right? And so, oh man, he sent one. And then I remember when we traveled to the state wrestling tournament for my son, who's a senior in high school, and I brought a pair of kettlebells with me, and like they're in the Airbnb staying on my pressing program. And nice. It's been a great odyssey. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I like your dedication. I remember one time I made it a point to do some traveling with, it was at least one kettlebell, maybe two. I went to Colorado a couple of years ago with some friends, and I think I used them like once, like the entirety of our trip. I just was not as dedicated. So I'm glad that my program had that kind of a reaction, that you're willing to travel with a pair of bells and do some lifting while you're in your Airbnb. I assume that this was a ground level Airbnb, so you didn't have to lug them up this flight of stairs or anything.
Yeah, definitely. It was an Airbnb in Hays, Kansas. So, it was everything in Hays, Kansas is pretty much ground level, right?
It's flat. Exactly.
It's flat. Yeah, well, otherwise it'd be leveled by a tornado.
Correct. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with Nebraska. I don't know if you've ever been here, but it's like people ask me like, so what's Nebraska like? And I'll tell them it's so flat you can watch your dog run away for 2 weeks.
That's a really good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very, very. I mean, they're called the Great Plains for a reason.
For a reason, so, yeah.
Exactly. Did you grow up in Kansas, or did you move?
I'm a Wisconsin guy. I grew up in Wisconsin. Yeah, okay. I moved to Kansas in the summer of 2003 when I started teaching here at a college, and so I've been here since then. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess that does make sense. Now, where in Wisconsin? Was it close to, was that like in roughly the same area where Pat lives now, or is it?
So Pat basically lives in what is now a suburb of Milwaukee, right? And I grew up about an hour and a half north of there on Lake Michigan, right? But Pat lives in my dad's hometown, right? So or he lives like right where my dad grew up. So
interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. What a small world.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I've been to Wisconsin a number of times to visit Pat, and I think it's the only times I've ever been there was like for that express purpose. And I what I like about it is it's similar in many ways to Nebraska. Yeah. It's like, having lived in Pennsylvania, it's just a very different it's a very different feel, like East Coast versus Midwest. It's just not the same. So I found that harder to get used to, but I think Wisconsin, I've been to Kansas a number of times, I feel like these are easier places to get acclimated to, at least for a Midwesterner like me who just grew up and got used to that sort of a thing.
Exactly.
Now in Wisconsin, where you grew up, were you like pretty physically fit and active growing up, or was that something that you just came across in later life?
Yeah, I mean, I played football and wrestled I did all like the kind of classic American sports in grade school, and then I wrestled through 8th grade and played football starting in 7th grade and did track in high school, and then I played football through college too. And so I remember, and I powerlifted. I was a pretty successful powerlifter, and like when I was, gosh, a freshman in high school, I could bench 275.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, if you saw me, I'm like built for that, right? Okay.
Sure.
And so I played football in college, and then basically got rendered a near invalid. So I had 3 stress fractures in my 5th lumbar that I picked up. Yeah, playing football in college. And I remember I thought everybody playing football was in that much pain as football, right? And I remember my senior year, the trainer's like, no, this is not normal, right? Right. And so right after that, I was an orthopedic mess in my early 20s because of football. And then so that got over with, and I go to grad school, and I keep like eating and drinking beer like a college football player, but I really can't do much but like just lift heavy at that point because my back was so bad. So I got very fat, right? Like really heavy. And so and then I'm in grad school and all that. And so, I start powerlifting again, and I get like really strong. I got over a 700-pound squat at that point. Yeah. But just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I get in my early 30s, and I've got kids, and I just realized it was time to lose weight. And so this would have been like 2005-ish to 2006, I lost 100 pounds. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mostly just did it like swinging a kettlebell. Like that was when, so I remember seeing kettlebells in like bodybuilding.com articles. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And ordered one and didn't really know what to do with it. I remember doing kind of like dead snatches off the ground with it and stuff like that. And then I got Pavel's original, kettlebell challenge book. But once again, that wasn't like that's a great book, but like programming wise, there's not a whole lot there for you, right? It's kind of go figure it out, kid. And then Enter the Kettlebell came out, and I did Enter the Kettlebell like just to the word. I was like a biblical fundamentalist with that book, man. I was like everything just by the book in that thing. And I really lost 100 pounds doing that. And I would do the 3 days a week of lifting in that, and then I would jog on the variety days and ate well. And yeah. And so then I went from, I didn't have the guts to get on the scale because I didn't want to know how much I weighed. I think I would have like jumped off a bridge. Right. And so I remember I lost a bunch of weight, and I got down to like 280. Right.
Wow.
And then, yeah. And then continue with it in about a year, got to about 220. And so I think I was well over 300 at that point. And then, anyway, so then I really got into kettlebells, got back into powerlifting at that point for a while, won some pretty interesting powerlifting stuff at a lighter body weight. And then by then I'm in my late 30s, and then I decide I want to really, really get like under 200 pounds at that point. So then I started getting into endurance stuff. I did, like triathlons, things like that. Right. And then get in my 40s, take up jujitsu, made some dietary changes. And now I walk around like 185. Right. But the constant for me in that whole time from like 2005 till now has been kettlebells. Yeah. It's like whatever I've done, I've always had that in my background. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. We have a similar introduction to kettlebells, but I was obviously from a different point, because for me, I was probably like 140 something pounds, like soaking wet when I discovered kettlebells way back in the day. And I'm about, and I'm about 185 now as well.
Really? Yeah.
So it's interesting because actually in Enter the Kettlebell, Pavel says that, I think it was in Enter the Kettlebell, that people who are overweight and people who are underweight tend to kind of like equalize once they start training with kettlebells. It's like people who are underweight have a tendency to put on a lot more muscle, as time goes on, provided they're training intelligently, obviously. And then likewise with people who are overweight, they have a tendency to like slim down. It is very interesting because I see, and this is another observation Pavel has made, but it's one that anybody could make really, that, barbell training really favors people who are heavier and bigger. And calisthenics really favors people who are smaller and more slight in their build. But kettlebells challenge both relatively equally. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why it kind of has a tendency to, again, have this sort of equalizing effect on people. Now, when you were doing the kettlebell training early on, did you get like one-on-one coaching, or was it just like you're going by the book and then approximating the movements as best you could?
Yeah, for me, it was all like basically autodidact stuff. Because remember, this is 2005, so this is early. I'm kind of like a kettlebell OG in some ways.
Yeah.
Right? There's one of Pavel's books, one of the early books. There's a ad for the old forum, and I think it's that one where in the background of the ad you can see a post from me.
Really?
yeah. It's like my one like little claim to fame in the kettlebell world. Yeah, and so I would be on that forum all the time, and like we'd be getting video and stuff like that. But I was autodidactic, right, on that. And I've been very but I'm super meticulous about safety. The kettlebell, my view is the kettlebell can be the best thing to happen to you or the worst thing to happen to you.
Yeah.
Depending how smart you are about it, right? And someone who's had like 10 on a scale of 10 back pain, I don't screw around. Like I do stuff right. But this is the first, like working with you is the first time I had some like really formal coaching in kettlebell where I wasn't like figuring out myself or reading books about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I've done the autodidact thing myself. I tried it with kettlebells, and I just did not have the coordination. I did it like first couple of months, and then I was very fortunate. My coach, Scott Stevens, who's been a guest on the show before, he wrote. There was some article in the World Herald about kettlebells, Omaha World Herald, which is a local newspaper, and it was kind of like dismissive. It was like, oh yeah, if you want to be strong enough, stronger for carrying your groceries in and everyday stuff, kettlebell might be good. And so he wrote in and he was, he explained that the article was not really accurately representing the benefits of kettlebell training.
Yeah.
And then he signed it, Scott Stevens, RKC. And this is back in like 2008. And I was like, oh my God, there's an RKC in Omaha. Like
I must go. Yeah.
I have to find this guy. And so I looked him up and, did some lessons with him. And that was a big help because I've been in autodidact and other things like for like languages, for example, like, I learned Hebrew on my own. But physical stuff, I'm better now because I've got enough coordination and I've built up this kind of like baggage of movement. But at that time I was like very poorly coordinated, just very awkward in my movement. And so it was a huge help for me. But
so were you an athlete coming up?
No, that's the other thing is that you and I don't have in common. I did gymnastics as a kid, not competitively. It was just kind of like a fun, thing my parents got me into. But that only lasted until I was maybe 8 or 9 or something like that. And I would play outside. I did like physical activities, but I was like always picked second to last in gym class in school. I was always. I would try not to have to participate in team sports to the best of my ability because I was just, again, like sort of a runt, didn't have a lot of physical abilities to me. And so I think it was, again, for me, on the one hand, I dodged a lot of bullets in terms of like the injuries that a lot of my classmates got from overzealous coaches, and stuff like that. But there was also this learning curve that probably would have taken place a lot earlier in my life had I started doing that. So,
something that helped me, I think, was, so when I'm going through this, so in 2005, my wife is pregnant with our 4th baby. So we have our oldest son, we have a set of twins who are like just under 2 years younger than he is. And then she was pregnant with our 4th child at the time. So we've got no money in very little time at this point in our life. Right. And so for me, just getting the kettlebell and getting the book, that was like my recreational money for the year.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So like there wasn't money for coaching, but there also wasn't money to like program hop. There wasn't money. Do you know what I mean? It's like I was sort of like, okay, you're going to have to, if you're going to do this, you're going to do this with like this original crappy 55-pound kettlebell I had and this book. And I remember it was a big deal when I saved up to get the 70-pound kettlebell, but and so I think that helped. like I was kind of in the situation where I couldn't afford anything but just to figure it out. But I knew if I didn't lose weight, I was going to be dead before these kids were in high school. You know what I mean? And so it kind of like but I also knew like not being able to go to bed because I hurt my back doing something stupid was not going to work either for the family. And so for me, I was in this situation where I just had to figure this out. And, you know, necessity being the mother of progress. There it was. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, I think that's something that back in the day, a lot of people experienced actually, because when there was not a whole lot of information, you kind of have no choice. Like you don't have the luxury of program hopping, like you pointed out.
Right.
I remember reading something too, like, you know, in the 30s and the 40s and 50s, people who were interested in physical culture, you had to like, usually it was like a course you had to buy like by mail. So you might get Joe Weider's, what do you call it? Like Muscle and Fitness, or you might get, you know, some of these other magazines. And then of course there'd be advertisements for, you know, for other products to get. And
for cake batter muscle gainers and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then it was like that, and then you sent your money in to go get that thing, and then and that was it. And you just did it like ad infinitum, until you could find something different. And I think that's one of the things that is most helpful for people is, again, staying consistent with something, because everything has an action and a consequence, but you got to see through, like, and again, the action of skipping to something else too soon has a consequence of you don't get to see all the results you might have seen if you had just stuck with it. You know, obviously there are more considerations than that, but for the most part, that's what people need to keep in mind.
Yeah.
So when you were finally like, you know, okay, like the kettlebell is my thing, I'm gonna keep doing it. How did you find that it helped you to kind of overcome some of those previous issues that you'd had, like, you know, the back pain issues and the other things you'd come across?
Yeah. Well, so one, it was the first time I had in any way got an inkling of the idea that, you know, quote unquote, and I hate to even use the word anymore, but cardio could be anything but just pounding on the road. Mm-hmm. Right. You know? And so right there, that idea that, you know, I could, for me, it was so easy to get a work. Like there was no excuse not to get a workout in when you're going to go out, do your presses and do a die roll. And this whole thing could be done in 15 minutes. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe longer, maybe less. Right. So for me, the first thing that got me hooked was, it was such a scalable, manageable way to like get in shape and like have this like demanding life outside of it. Right. Mm-hmm. Moreover, I found as soon as I really figured out how to do a swing, it just did wonders with my back. Right. Like I have zero back problems now, like zero. Right. And before that I was having trouble. Right. And now losing the weight helps for that. But also I lost the weight swinging the kettlebell and other things weren't working. Right. And so like that for me, it seemed like the swing really did some like good work for me on correcting my back stuff. Right now, I'm not an orthopedics guy. I mean, that's anecdotal, right? There's a lot of other variables being played with there, but that was key, right?
I think that's the case for a lot of people because, you know, one of the things, and I think I like barbell training. I think it's fun, but I also think that it's like the last thing that most people should do. Like meaning that not that they should never do it, but like if you really want to do it, you have to get really good with, I think, kettlebells and calisthenics first, because the barbell is very unforgiving. Like one wrong move and, you know, like if you're lucky, the weight doesn't go anywhere. If you're not, you could end up you could tweak something, you know, you could have all sorts of issues. So, and then, you know, even stuff like hinges, you know, like, so for like a barbell deadlift, you're ostensibly moving through the hips and that sort of a thing. But the weight is necessarily out in front of you. It's just the nature of the barbell, right? It's not like underneath you, like with a kettlebell, or in the case of deadlifts, people are mostly not doing them for high reps. And so the ability to do a fair amount of volume with a movement that kind of works with a piece of exercise equipment that works with your body rather than forces your body around its own shape, like with the barbell, really does have a lot of wondrous effects on a lot of people.
I agree. So it was right when I was getting into jiu-jitsu, probably like 6-ish years ago. I did a 300% body weight deadlift, right?
Wow.
And felt like garbage for 2 weeks after I did that. Like I not orthopedically, I just felt like I had been run over by a semi. Like I just dead. Like my nervous system was just shot, right? And I remember thinking, okay, Jim, you're like 42 years old. you're done. Like that was like, okay, there's nothing more to be gained by doing this. Right. But whereas like, now when I train, and I've even like, like wrote a book about barbell training. So that I'm all for training with a barbell when it's the time for you to train with a barbell. But now I train exclusively with calisthenics, kettlebells, clubs, and maces. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, I can do so much more that way, and I can work it around my jujitsu. I can work around other things, and I don't have that drained, right, completely spent, beat up, and I'm not taking the orthopedic risk, right?
Absolutely.
And I can tell you, like, so right now, I probably will never bench press with a barbell again, right? Just going and like holding my hands in that position and stretching down to chest level, I can feel that, right? But if I just take it like this, I don't feel that tension, that stretch, right? Same thing if I hold my hand like this to press, overhead, as opposed to this or however they want to be, I don't feel that tension, right? And so I just feel like all those implements let my body move the way it wants to, right, rather than forcing it to this artificial plane. And that has made a big difference for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I remember when I did Krav Maga many years ago, there was a guy that I trained with, and his name was Bob. I think we called him Big Bob. I don't know if you've ever seen Harold and Kumar escape from Guantanamo Bay. It was not that kind of Big Bob. It was just some massive powerlifting dude. And I mean, he was like 300 pounds, like muscular dude. And obviously had a little bit of body fat on him too. But I mean, he was like, he was a tough dude. And I remember he used to be a professional power lifter, or competitive at least. Not professional, but competitive. And he's like, yeah, you know what? Like, I can't bench with a barbell anymore. He's like, I can bench with dumbbells. I have no problem. But every time I try to bench with a barbell, like now I put on a little bit of weight onto the bar and then my shoulder just gives out.
Yeah. I know a lot of guys in their 40s that say the same thing.
Yeah. I think, I've spent a little time benching. I got hurt doing it twice. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, you can't, why blame the movement? It's like, okay, you know what? You might be able to say that for a lot of things, but the bench press just seems to have this effect on a lot of people.
A lot of anecdotal stuff on that. Yeah.
Well, the thing is though, like technique is not the only thing. For instance, like if you get an overuse injury, it doesn't matter how good your technique is. You've just, you've done something far too much relative to other movements that might balance your body out more. So it has nothing to do with technique.
And take a guy like me who started bench pressing in like 7th grade, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to add up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, some people can get away with it. I mean, I also think that if you have, maybe if like your levers are a little bit better suited to it, you might not have as many issues. But I think again, pinning your shoulder blades in place on a bench while your shoulders move, but your shoulder blades aren't doing much of anything, just not a normal position. Yeah. So, and you can definitely lift a lot like that, but it's not good on you.
So, I this spring I was kind of getting this itch to start deadlifting again. Right. And, so for me, this is like, I'm going to get back together with this like bad girlfriend. Right.
Yeah.
And
I can fix her.
Yeah, exactly. You can fix her. Yeah, exactly. She'll be good this time. She won't hurt me this time. Right. No, she will. And I remembered though, in the midst of this moment of temptation, right. Once again, go back to the Pavel thing. You remember Pavel's double kettlebell book? Was it Return of the Kettlebell?
Absolutely.
And, he has you during the heavy grind phase of that program, just do 2 or 3 sets of 20 with a pair of kettlebells for your deadlifts. Right.
Yeah.
So I just started taking a pair of 36 kilogram kettlebells and just doing, after all my pressing workouts, and doing just 3 sets of 20 of very, very strict kind of conventional style deadlifts that way. And I tell you, I think that checked the box. I think that really did the thing. And once again, those dumbbells are free to, or kettlebells are free to move in the position that's good for me. The weight's relatively light, right? But it's, I think it's plenty of weight for an already strong person, right? So there too is the kettlebells, I think, saved me from like getting back with this bad girl, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's another thing to be said about the importance of different rep ranges, because a lot of people get really hung up on only doing low reps. Yeah. And obviously, there's value to it for your strength, but then eventually you're going to wear out your adaptive capacity. And this goes too for like, if you don't have enough muscle on you and you're still trying to just, bang out the low rep sets ad infinitum, you don't have enough contractile tissue to just keep getting stronger. So you're going to have to rely on nervous system efficiency And that's much more fleeting, so a lot of times, for instance, like you can build up this really high level of let's say neural efficiency in a couple of movements, but the minute you take a layoff that's a little bit too long, a lot of it's just going to go away. Yeah. So it's that's one of the things that I really liked about Return of the Kettlebell, is that especially a lot of, like, I think the newer fans of Strong First, they haven't really read a lot of Pavel's older stuff, because even though he favors low rep stuff, he knows that there's a time to put we'll put it this way, there's a time for everything under the sun, to quote the Ecclesiastes.
This has been said. Yeah,
exactly. But no, I'm a big fan of that. In fact, I'm doing something very similar right now at the notes. Yeah, at the end. Now, a couple months ago, when you came to me, you were very interested in improving your press, because, as I recall, at one point you had a very big press, but in your opinion, it kind of didn't count because it was like when you were still very heavy or something to that effect, right?
Yeah. So I've pressed the beast, right? I think I maybe even had done it for reps on the right arm, but at the time I still probably weighed like 220. So and then I haven't been able to move. I haven't really tried that much to move a really heavy kettlebell overhead since I got into the 180s, right? But I think I could, at the time I remember I should be able to do this, and I hadn't really worked on grind strength in any serious way for a few years. And I've always just found pressing overhead to be fun as heck, right? So kind of New Year's resolution sort of thing, I wanted to get my overhead press with a kettlebell back in order, right? And so when we started, I could not press the 40 kg in my left, and I could get one ugly one on my right. And once again, for me, like that was a real fall from where I had been, right? Of course, there's body weight loss and stuff like that, and age too. We're talking like 10 years ago. It's probably my late 30s last time I'd seriously worked overhead press. But so I felt like, it would be fun to have a grind strength goal to work on for several months. And so in the press seemed like the safest, best way to do it that would interfere the least with my jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's the big one, actually, because I think a lot of people underestimate just how draining jiu-jitsu can be if they're not careful. It's like there's a lot of energy that gets expended when you're doing it. And particularly if you're on the wrong side of 40, you have to really consider your recovery, because you're not going to recover as fast. It's like, people say stuff like age is just a number, and it's like, that's a nice sentiment, but try getting to that age and seeing if everything works exactly the way that it's supposed to.
Go roll around with a 280-pound guy who is less than half your age.
Yeah.
You'll feel your age.
Yeah,
you'll feel your age, trust me.
Even comparable skill level, like you're going to find that he's got a couple of advantages. It's just
it's just true fact. Yeah,
exactly. Now, a lot of people will think that, okay, well, this just means I'm getting old, can't do this stuff anymore, but that's not quite the case.
That's false.
You just have to train differently.
Yeah. And I'll say this, I have found that kind of like some, and I don't know if there's any science on this, but I have found doing some reasonable, moderate, heavy strength stuff helps with my recovery. So for instance, in your program, what I did is I put those heavy pressing days on the morning after my hardest rolling sessions. Because I've always found like at the morning after those heavy rolling sessions, I just get up, and like a lot of times, like when I won worlds that year, the morning after my heavy jiu-jitsu training sessions, I would do some weighted pull-ups. I do 5 to 10 singles or doubles with what would have been like moderately heavy weights, right? I would just barely be able to drag myself out to the garage to do it, and I would walk out feeling like $1 million wanting to train again that day.
Interesting.
So I have found you got to you can't go out there and think you're going to prove something, right? It's got to be like, I'm going to do some good, just chill. Like I always say, if you can't listen to NPR, you're like, you need, while you're doing it, like you need too much pump up, right?
Yeah.
You got to put on like death metal to do it. It's not right. You know what I mean? I just need to be able to do like chill, listen to a podcast, get up on the bar, do 1 or 2 reps of weighted pull-ups, move on. And I would come out just feeling like $1 million. And I had a very similar thing with this pressing program. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. I wonder what that is. I just out of curiosity, did you sleep less after a hard workout on average, do you find, or?
It depends. Like when I first started training jiu-jitsu, I would get terrible insomnia. after training hard, because it'd be in the evening and I would come home, I'm all pumped up. Right.
Yeah.
But now that I've like really chilled out on the mats, I can go and just, really, really get after it and then come home and sleep like a baby. Right.
Yeah.
So that's not been a problem so much. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. I don't know how to describe that phenomenon then, because that seems like, I mean, that's a great circumstance to have, where it's like, that after a really hard rolling session, you're good for a hard strength session.
Yeah. Or I should say like hard-ish, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not, you're not looking for PRs, but you're definitely pushing yourself.
So I did, gosh, I'm gonna forget the guy's name. He wrote a little ebook called Squat Every Day.
I know you're talking about. Yeah, I don't remember the guy's name either. Because
I did that program one winter where I went out to my garage at my lunch break every day for, it was like 15 weeks, and just squatted to a heavy single, just what heavy, quote unquote heavy, right? Whatever like felt enough that day, I did it, right? And I tell you, I just felt like $1 million and that was going on, and I got really strong, and like my body composition improved a little bit, stuff like that. So maybe I just respond well to that sort of thing. But it had to be chill. For me, it's especially with jiu-jitsu, I think you can't afford to like waste adrenaline when you're not rolling, right?
Yeah.
So I just simply will not do anything on my strength work, my off the mat work, that requires me to like really get pumped up or amped, right? If my workouts have to be boring.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And I also think that there's something to be said about making sure that there's some routine in there. Like if your body, this is the other thing actually about recovery, is that if you're always waiting until you're perfectly well recovered, your recovery is never going to improve, because you're not really challenging it. It's kind of like, if you're never trying to do more difficult variations of exercises, very possible, or more repetitions or whatever, it's very possible you're just not going to get that much stronger after a while. You're just going to adapt. So your body has to, it has to be nudged along like that. Now, when it came to the pressing program that I wrote for you, one of the big things that I tried to focus on was, number one, it was like, getting enough variety in your training, so that it was like, because again, the goal was a one-arm press, but my approach to it is like, I think that you need to kind of train both. So it's like, you need to have a really good, strong pressing groove for the single, but you also don't want to have to spend all day doing a whole ton of volume, because I had to be cognizant of the fact that, you're in the gym, rolling around with people a couple times a week. So it's like, how do we build up enough strength to do, to be able to do that, but then also to continue to work you toward a heavier military press. And then also keep from, busting your body up too much. And I think we had a pretty decent result, because you tested recently. And what were the results again?
So I had never attempted to press double 36s before, right? And I came through with a triple of those.
Nice.
Right, on those. When we had tested on double 32s, I came in at a 5. And today, or with originally, and then when we retest at the end, I came in at 7.
Nice.
Though I remember I felt like I wussed. I think I really should have gone for 8 there, but I wussed.
No, but that's still pretty good. It's a 40% increase.
Yeah. And then I went from 0 with the 40 kg on my left and 1 on my right, to 1 on my left and 3 on my right. Right. So that's massive pressing improvement. Right.
Absolutely. And then at what age? You're 48 now?
I'm 48. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty good. And this is a good example too, that anybody who is listening, who's interested in getting stronger as they get older, people have a tendency to think, can I really do this? I'm 40, whatever, I'm 50. And it's like, no, you can, because strength training is something that, more than anything, I think you have more ability to continue to get stronger as you get older than you do a lot of other skills.
Yeah.
And so, and meaning like, you're probably never going to beat, the local sprint champion, but you could conceivably outlift a lot of the people, in your area who maybe been doing these.
I am known as one of the strongest guys in my jiu-jitsu gym, and it was funny, while I was doing this program, people were like, what are you doing? You feel like you're getting stronger. So I think like my teammates noticed that I was already known for being strong, and people are like, what are you doing? You're getting stronger. And one of the things that this program brought out to me too is the degree to which the overhead press is a full body lift.
Yeah,
it really is. And remember, I remember we talked, like, I was kind of worried about what I was going to do with my lower body while we're doing it. And I did add those, those higher rep deadlifts, but I didn't feel a need. I was going to do a lot of like double front squats and stuff. I didn't do nearly as much as I thought I would, because I really felt like I was kind of just with the cleans and the full body tension, that I was getting stronger in my hips and glutes and my core in the ways that I wanted to. And I really think like the way it carried over to the mat, because you don't do a lot of pushing in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But it did feel like, and I had people say, it seems like you're getting stronger. Yeah. So that really brought out to me the degree to which the overhead press is a full body strengthener. Yeah. In that functional way. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, especially for that being the main lift that you focused on, for you to have gotten comments like that from people that you're mostly pulling around. You're not pushing them around, so much, pulling them around. Yeah. Definitely says something. Well, I hope you sent them my way. I hope you were like,
but
go join.
Yeah. And you did have me do a quite a bit of pulling though too, as part of the programming too. Like,
absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. And a lot of it was like a prehab kind of thing, but still probably did something for me,
absolutely. And speaking of which too, this is something that's very important, because I don't hear people talk about this much. And this is especially the case in the kettlebell world, but I had to do a lot of like bourgeois bodybuilding type of stuff as well. Yeah. And how did that work out for you?
I mean, like in stuff that I would have not have thought to do right, at all. And so this is the way I would put it is, I didn't realize that I was like having shoulder pain and stuff until like you got me out of it. Right.
Yeah.
Like I remember just a few weeks in the program saying, my gosh, my shoulders feel better. I didn't know they were bothering me. Right.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of stiffness and crunchiness and stuff in there. That, it was like a frog in boiling water with all the jiu-jitsu and all the stuff I was doing, that, it wasn't where there's a single event where I got hurt, but I think there was a lot of junk adding up, and all the sort of the bodybuilding pulling that I did, I think really paid off. And my shoulders feel awesome now. And I can just my mobility, and just, and I've even had this like stuff like on the mat when I'm getting like commord, I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. Right. And so I've really felt that stuff carry over. Yeah.
No, that's very good to hear, because I think that this is, again, something where, for instance, like when kettlebells came back on the scene and strength was something that people were a little bit more interested, a lot of people kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, and they were like, bodybuilding is not functional, it's not useful. But the reality is that, like, if you look, there's a great book by Marty Gallagher where he talks about, the real OG lifters were generally good at, not all of them, because some of them lived in different eras, but like they were generally good at powerlifting, Olympic lifting, and bodybuilding, which what he calls like, the big three of like iron disciplines. And a great example of this would be like Tommy Kono, who's like one of the greatest Olympic lifters of all time. He would work his way up to crushing people in competition on the Olympic lifting platform, and then immediately afterward he would go and he would just do bodybuilding for many weeks, and then as the bug started to bite him again to start doing more Olympic lifting, he would slowly work the bodybuilding stuff out to the side. He would add in more and more Olympic lifting until he was doing it exclusively, and then he would compete again and he would crush his competitors again. And but there's a tendency I think in people's simplification of things to think that, okay, that has to be this simple all the time, and there's no context for bodybuilding movements or isolation exercises or this sort of a thing. And my experience just for myself and my students has been that they couldn't be further from the truth.
I think something that, and I don't know if it's a general problem for people with your background, but for someone like me, coming out of like the old school Pavel stuff and like a kind of a strong first fellow traveler, a fan, right? Okay. There's so much emphasis on the pull-up, right? And, for me too, in losing weight, it was sort of, I have like a kind of a psychological attachment to the pull-up. If I can do 20 pull-ups, I know I'm not fat. Right.
Yeah.
And in this program you set up for me, I did a lot fewer in terms of the total number of pull-ups as I normally do. Okay. I think that was good for me because I've really neglected the row and other planes of pulling compared to the pull-up. And I wonder too, if, when you're doing a lot of pressing, press and the pull are kind of, they're antagonistic in that same. So you're really working that one range of motion really, really heavy. And to get out of that, I think was really good for me, and to work on other planes of pulling. Cause I think I myself had a pretty bad, maybe still do, I'm working on it now, pretty bad imbalance in that way. So I'd never been a big rower. I'd always been a pull-up guy. Yeah.
Yeah. And you think for jujitsu too, like a lot of the pulling you're doing, it's not coming from overhead. It's coming from out in front of you,
Up, yep.
Exactly. And so I think that, some might argue, well, you don't need any more of it than if you're always doing that. But the reality is that you're also getting a lot of internal rotation of the shoulders, a lot of sort of hunching forward. And rows are one of those rare movements where there's not really any internal rotation of the shoulder, which is not bad. It's something that you need for these movements. But if you too much of anything is too much. So it keeps the shoulder in a bit more of a neutral position. Yeah. And you can really, it's very hard to overdo it on rows. I mean, you can do a lot of them like every single day.
And so I've basically committed to make the row my main event pulling motion rather than the pull-up. Right? Yeah. And then I love the pull-up. Yeah.
Yeah. I think in the future too, you'll go back to the pull-up and you'll find you probably haven't lost all that much off of it.
Right.
That's been my experience. I did a program recently where there's really no pull-ups, but I was doing a lot of rows a couple times a week. And in spite of the fact that I put on a decent amount of body weight, I could still hit the same number of pull-ups, and even without doing a lot of pull-ups. So a lot of people, I think, are afraid to move away from the things that they love for fear that they won't come back. The reality is that's actually oftentimes what draws it closer is by pushing it away and doing some other things instead.
And this is a theme that you hit earlier, but I really want to emphasize is, I think there's probably a time where I would have said, I really probably shouldn't be overhead pressing, in my age, I'm doing jujitsu and stuff like that. But you have to look at like, what are you doing along with it? And what are you doing to correct problems you might have with it? And if you like, so it's not as if like the overhead press exists in a vacuum, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? And I think this is one of the things I really learned from this program is, if you're going to do a push, you got to have the right pulling surrounding. I think we've always known that, but I don't think I realized how sophisticated that actually is. Right.
Definitely.
And how, if you get that right, like how a lot of stuff you thought was beyond your limit now for your age or whatever, like it may not be and probably isn't. Right. Yeah. If you get it smartly set up. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's one of the things where I always admire the autodidacts when it comes to training, but my experience has been not just for training, but again, for a lot of other things. If you want to go farther, you've got to call upon the collective experience and wisdom of people who've been there before you, and particularly people who understand where you're coming from and where you're trying to go, so that they don't just get you down a path that will kind of get you kind of close to where you wanted to go or in the general vicinity, but will get you to exactly where you need to go. And that's why, I've hired coaches. I know I've hired people to help me with a lot of things, because again, it's one thing to be self-guided, but if you want to be self-guided well, it's helpful to identify the people who can help guide you in that direction. So whether that's they work with you one-on-one, or you get one of their products or programs or something like that and follow it like that. I think it's very important. A lot of people have a tendency to want to be like, I can figure it out in my way. You'll get a certain distance like that, but you may not get the whole distance.
I was a couple weeks into this and I messaged Pat Flynn and said, holy cow, this guy's a black belt, man. Like I thought I knew something, but I don't, right? This is the first time I've worked directly with a formal, like strong first certified coach like that. And it was like it's a different deal. It's a different deal. Yeah. So, I would highly recommend anybody who's looking to if you've got really serious quantifiable goal stuff in mind, definitely like take the trouble to get a serious consult. Yeah. If not a program setup. Yeah.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I think that, again, a lot of people, time's a wasting, we'll put it like that, and so, I'm a big fan of the hypertrophy expert, Paul Carter, and he used to have on one of his old blogs, it was him wearing a t-shirt, and on the back it said, "Death is winning, do something."
Yeah. He's a Kansas City guy. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
My last powerlifting meet I did, he was at.
Really?
Yeah.
What's he like? Is he cool?
I didn't meet him. He was just there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He seems like an intimidating dude. He's like a big, massive guy. Yeah. Crazy smart. But his shirt makes perfect sense. And I think it really hones in on exactly the issue, is that, you're, no matter time's passing by, and it's going to pass anyway. So you could either arrive where you're, in the same, at the same time at, let's say 3 months in the future, and be stronger, be in the same spot, or be weaker. I mean, those are basically your choices.
Chris Hodder is kind of my favorite, like old school jiu-jitsu black belt guy. And he says, look, you're going to get 10 years older one way or another. It's just a question of whether or not you'll have a black belt at the end of it. Yeah. And I that's something I really took to heart. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly what it is. It's either you're moving forward with forward intent, or you're just, letting the stream carry you where it may.
Yeah. And, like for me, I've always just kind of enjoyed the higher volume, chip away at it kind of workouts, right? Which this fit really well, right? Because I don't like a workout where I have to stress about whether I'm going to make the numbers. In fact, I won't do it. If, you know what I mean? If there's a question of whether I'm going to be able to keep up with it, given the other stuff I'm doing, I won't take up the program at all. Right. Cause then it's a stressor. I'm not recovering, all that stuff. And one of the ways this is very big on the way you did this is I had numbers. They were very easy to get. Right. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't a stress. You know what I mean? And I think that is really key for follow through for people, right? Yeah. Is that like, I know I can do it. I just got to go in there and chip away at it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. And another thing that I made it a point to include in the program was, and I'm not going to give away too many details for the people, but it was adding more volume without adding more volume.
Yeah.
And that's all I can say. It's not,
brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yes. It's not it sounds like the sound of one hand clapping, but there's actually an answer that when you see it, you're like, aha, makes perfect sense. And so, yeah, I mean, most of the pressing that you did was very reasonable in terms of the amount of weight.
Yeah.
It wasn't even approaching anything like 40 kilos for the majority of the time. It was far, far less. And nevertheless, you improved your military press in your right side by 300%, going from 1 to 3 reps. And, from 0 to 1.
Infinite improvement there.
Exactly. It's like you can't even really, quantify it.
Unquantifiable.
Exactly.
And just a general thing too is, like whether or not someone does a program for you or they buy a book and do a program. Like, I think you learned this about me into this process is like if you told me to do it, I was going to do it. Right. Mm-hmm. If you told me to you're going to have to balance a kettlebell on your head while so I would have done it. Right. Because my view is when you take up someone else's program, I hate it when you hear someone say, yeah, I was a couple weeks in, but it wasn't working for me. Well, how do you know it wasn't working for you when it was a 15-week program and you're only 2 weeks in? What were you, what were you expecting to have happen at that point? Right. And so even if I just buy a book, right, if I start the program, I am going to do that thing, every detail all the way through. So I have a sense if the thing actually worked or not, unless I think it's dangerous or something like that. Right. Yeah. I just think it's important. And also, I also do think it's important not to be always be coaching yourself. There's a time for that, but I think it is very good to have an objective person come in and say, look, here's what you need to do. Here's some stuff you never thought of, and just do what I say on this and trust me. Right. And that's how you're going to actually learn something. Right. So
yeah,
I just advise people, if you pick up a program and you do it, commit and see it through. Yeah.
I think especially what's important is the change in the mindset of needing some sort of needing a mental stimulus. So I like the approach of show up, I'm going to do this. It's not an emotional decision. It's just I'm just going to be whether I'm in a good mood or a bad mood, whether I feel like going or not, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this because this is just what's on the menu. And I think it's easy to do that when you have workouts that are reasonable to accomplish, because that will ultimately get you these radical results that are not easy to get if you're always pushing yourself. And it's I tell people, if you go to school and they give you a test every single day, how much do you think you're going to learn?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. You go to work out and every day is the test day. You're testing something. You're not really going to be putting a lot of strength in the bank. It's got to be show up, you kind of punch the clock, as it were, and you change your mindset from this distant goal that psychs you up and it requires a lot of emotional investment to one that's process oriented. Okay, I can't control how much I'm going to be able to lift 8 weeks from now, but I can control how many workouts I show up to, how much of the work that's written in, that I do. And that in and of itself, it's very easy to hit goals like that. And then you can really start to see, provided you're doing things the way that you're supposed to, really start to see the dial turn in your favor.
Yep. Agreed. And then you don't need as many like weeks off and stuff like that.
Exactly.
If you never beat yourself down, then you don't need that.
You don't need to build yourself back up. Yeah.
Build yourself back up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So Jim, where can people find you online if they want to keep up with your jujitsu antics and your kettlebell weight?
So I'm on Facebook. There I'm under James D. Madden. I'm on Twitter where I'm JD Madden 3, I believe. Mm-hmm. And jdmadden.com is jdmadden.com is my webpage where I have a philosophy side of it and a fitness side of it.
Very nice. Yeah. And then the question
and I'm often on Pat's show. So
of course, yeah. So you can tune into the Pat Flynn show and hear the musings of Jim and Pat anytime you want. I'm gonna ask the question that I know that everybody's got in mind, and nobody has probably ever asked you this before. But are you any relation to John Madden?
No, I'm not, but I was asked that so many times. I finally acquiesced and named one of my sons John. So
seriously,
yeah. We call he goes by Jack, right? But I do have a son named John Madden. Yeah,
John Madden, that's great. Yeah, does he have a good impression of John Madden?
No, he doesn't. Right, and he's kind of a tall, skinny redhead, so he would not pass for John Madden very well.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, also John Madden's dead, so I don't think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to be mistaken for.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Madden anytime soon. Yeah. By the way, and for those in Europe and beyond who are listening, John Madden was a very famous American football commentator. He was a football player at some point in his youth, and I think he had a knee injury and he had to stop playing. But he became this legendary commentator to such a degree that
great coach too. Yeah.
The coach. Yeah, exactly. But to such a degree that they had a lot of football video games named after him, like Madden, 2004 or whatever. So yeah, that's the joke. So Americans will get it. People who live in other countries may not get it, but look them up. You'll see what I'm talking about.
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, Jim, I got to say thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, thank you for helping me with this program. We got the results we were looking for. It's pretty cool to see.
Yes, I'm very happy to have gotten that. And I look forward to the future results and, of course, to watching you and hearing stories about you crushing your enemies on the mat, seeing them driven before you and hearing the lamentations of their women.
Nice.
Exactly.
Nice.
So, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. And as always, have fun and happy training.